I want to acknowledge, it's so fun, John McKnight, to have you here. You've had a huge influence on how this whole state has thought about how we do this work. I also want to acknowledge Harry Boyd, who is somebody that is a very forward thinker in the community space, but how appropriate at this 20th anniversary, John, that you're coming back to remind us of some things we know. And I also have to say, I am just blown away. Julie Plout and John Hammerlink, you might know those two, have just produced a book called Asset-Based Community Engagement in Higher Education, hot off the presses. Get a copy. I'm just so encouraged that this kind of thinking, that kind of thinking continues. I want to actually, like I said, I want to do three things. A little pre-Minnesota Campus Compact history about the movement, because we've been talking about movements, and I think it's important for people to understand how this movement in Minnesota kind of got off the ground and how it's just been hugely fueled, obviously, by Minnesota Campus Compact. Secondly, I want to offer some congrats and acknowledgments to some Minnesota Campus Compact past and current leaders. And then I just want to offer a couple thoughts about why I think your collective work as campuses, as Minnesota Campus Compact is still some of the most important work going on anywhere. So pre-Minnesota Campus Compact, I wanted to acknowledge a few folks, and you're going to hear a number of names here. I feel beholden to acknowledge some of these early leaders. I don't know if folks know this, but it was actually in 1987, University of Minnesota YMCA got a grant from the Otto Bremer Foundation, actually, and fueled what then became Minnesota Campus Outreach Opportunity League. How many of you remember COOL, an old student movement that got off the ground, and we sort of hitched our train to them. I was the original director of these two things, and then that morphed into what's called the Minnesota Campus Service Initiative, which was the precursor to Minnesota Campus Compact. I want to acknowledge particularly Jim Kielsmeyer, who I don't think is in the room today, but with the National Youth Leadership Council, because at the time the Minnesota Campus Service Initiative got off the ground, one of the most important things that happened in 1989 is there was a very small piece of state legislation that was passed here in Minnesota. I don't even remember the name of the piece of legislation, but it was to support community service, learning, civic engagement kinds of efforts. And I have to say, there's some folks here still today who obviously don't look any older, unlike me. Folks like Karen Trail Johnson from McAllister and Mary Laurel True from Augsburg, and Carl Samp, who was one. Many of the positions, the initial positions that were created on campuses to move forward the service learning agenda were created as a result of this piece of state legislation. Let me move on, secondly, to congratulate and acknowledge some Minnesota Campus Compact past and current leaders. I also, not sure how many of you know that there was an unsuccessful attempt to create Minnesota Campus Compact in 1989. It's so rare I get to cite history here, and it is making me feel kind of old. But very interesting, the presidents at that time didn't feel like the state was quite ready for the coalition. So I want to offer a special thanks to Axel Stoyer. Axel, are you still here? And Bob Weisenfeld. Bob, are you still here? Bob is here. Hi, Bob. The fact that they persisted in getting this off the ground, and I really want to acknowledge Bob's leadership because he really worked hard behind the scenes in a whole lot of ways to make sure that this happened. And Axel, I think, was very smart in assembling that first group of presidents that you heard about earlier. Two other folks I want to acknowledge. Erin Boley is here somewhere. She was the associate director. There's Erin for 5 years, Erin? Was it 5? Was it 7, 6? 6 years. When you're an executive director, you get a lot of the accolades and you get to stand up here at the 20th anniversary celebration, but I actually want to pause for a second. And if I look at a single person who made the biggest difference for this organization in a very short time on the front end of the organization, it's Erin. So I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge her. All right, I really only have 2 minutes now. So I want to also acknowledge and thank and congratulate the past chairs. I don't know if you all saw in the other room, there's a great list of acknowledgments with past staff and past chairs and past board members. These folks really made it happen from 1994 to 2014. And if you have a chance, particularly for the folks that served on the board, to say thank you. I said thank you to Earl today. I remember the 4 or 5 different board chairs I worked with when I was executive director, and without their support and encouragement and without a great, good-spirited kind of relationship and back and forth, this organization wouldn't be where it is today. So thanks to all of you who have volunteered your time in a whole variety of ways. Finally, very quick word. I'm doing a session a little later if you want to hear a little bit about what I'm doing now at I Have a Dream Foundation Oregon, but I want to say there's a couple things that have remained steady in my work since 2004 and will be steady going forward, and I think are bedrock pieces of what Minnesota Campus Compact is all about. First, I think it's absolutely critical in this day and age of huge issues and limited resources that we figure out how to do a much better job of leveraging and aligning existing resources in communities, and that you listen to John and you talk about the human capital, the organizational capital, et cetera. We're actually working with 60 organizations right now at an elementary school, middle school, high school track that we're running in Oregon. And it's unbelievable what can happen when you really powerfully leverage and align, and that's what you all are all about every day. The second thing is, I see every day with the kids who I'm working with now how critical it is to not just, and I'm talking elementary, middle, and high school kids primarily, but also college kids, college students. You know, the notion of developing in the next generation a deep sense of community engagement and asset-based approach to working with neighbors. It's the thing, again, all of you have heard this before, but when de Tocqueville came to this country, he marveled at the fact that we would band together in these voluntary associations. It's what makes us unique, and it's what you all are helping preserve. You're doing nothing less than sustaining the third leg of a stool that really is the experiment called the United States of America. And I just want to say, the tough days, I know it doesn't always look good, but you are doing absolutely critical work. Thank you so much for persisting in the work, and thank you for letting me take 2 extra minutes.